U.S. lawmakers invade Taiwan. Ukraine greenlighted to start World War III. Anti-home birth propaganda or legit study? Those stories and more. The Monica Perez Show starts now. Thank you all for joining on this live stream. It is Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. That's when I do my live streams. You can catch it every Tuesday and Thursday. And right after that, it's going to go up into the podcast feed. So if you listen on a podcast feed, please give me a review. I need more reviews. And if I get enough reviews, I'll add an extra show. So I'll do 3 instead of 2 news roundups or newsreels in a week. And if you don't like the commercials and the podcasting feeds, which I also do not like, but they don't even quite cover my very excellent and worthy producer, it's better for all of us if you sign up for the premium feed on iTunes, which has a little early release, has a little bonus material, but mostly it's about being commercial free. So help me out there. And one other plug while I'm at it. I love True Hemp Science. I have to say it is a life-changing experience. So if you like CBD, you're not getting better than True Hemp Science. And if you've never tried it, but have anxiety or trouble sleeping or go to the wine every single night, give it a shot. It's really awesome. I can assure you, truehempscience.com, and you can type in Monica in the promo code and see what little goodies he's got in store for you, and call them. They'll tell you what you're into, what's right for what you're into. Anyway, enough about that. Although it is all important, top story for me is actually rather undercovered, not very well covered, that U.S. senators and congressmen have basically invaded Taiwan. Or I should say, I think that's what they want to make it look like. Let's peel that onion. So we've had a delegation of congressmen from, including the Foreign Services Committee or Foreign Policy Committee, whatever it's called. And and then just we had a delegation of senators go over to Taiwan. And literally, I was thinking like they just probably want to go to Taiwan. But there's a lot more to it than that. I don't actually put that past them. When I've seen how the Europeans get together and their EU and stuff, they meet in old castles and stuff, like with that still have gilded ceilings, and they're eating caviar. So I would not underestimate the value of that stuff for these people. It's really yucky. But what goes on in Taiwan is bigger than that. But it's still probably just about money in their pockets, but it's bigger than just them getting to have first class experience. What's been happening lately? So you might have heard that China is popping off on Taiwan, but there's a reason for that. So I believe it was January, there were elections. There's a new president who was just inaugurated May 20th. But in that election, his party, the DPP, lost the majority status in parliament, in their legislative body. And he actually won the presidency with less than 50% of the vote. And he was the VP who took over from the president because of term limits. So his name is William Lai, Lai, and he's got a Chinese name, obviously, but he also goes by William Lai, which is, I'm pretty positive I can pronounce that one. So I'm using that. And he is considered and definitely says stuff that makes one think that he is for independence, for separation of Taiwan from China, which Taiwan's status right now is they do not declare that they are fully independent, but they also do not submit to the rule of China. They're in a kind of limbo, and our relationship with them is unofficial, although a lot of these people make noises as if it is official. Not Anthony Blinken, but even this guy Lai is like, hey, great partnership, guys, which is kind of a hot thing to say. So it's tricky though, because and in the parliament there was no majority, although the DPP lost their majority. But the Kuomintang, which I was like, that sounds familiar. I think that's the old school kind of during the maybe the communist rebellion or whatever. Like, I should have looked that up, but that sounded familiar. Anyway, it's called the KMT, and it's definitely more China leaning. They got a plurality, which means the largest block of votes or of representatives in the parliament, but not a majority. They have to join with the TPP, the Taiwan People's Party, in order to get the majority. But in that capacity, those guys passed some legislation that turned out to be controversial. So let's start um, with what's going on. So this guy was inaugurated, I think, May 20th. Right after that, China, I mean, they basically strafe Taiwan. They run around it in boats and, whatever, moon them, I guess, or shoot scary weapons like close to them is more accurate. And they've been doing that quite a bit since, or that policy of what they call, I think, a punishment display, or what did they call it? Punishment drill, which they did on Inauguration Day. They started that when Pelosi went over there in August 2022, which I did some deep dives on that because I determined that her entire purpose there was about the Taiwan Semiconductor Company. And it was in advance of the CHIPS Act, where we're highly, highly subsidizing really advanced chips. But that in order to get that, you cannot get that subsidy to get our contracts. You cannot sell to China. So I actually recalled a name from economics of what our goal is. It's to be the chips, the advanced chips monopsony. So we don't a monopoly is one supplier, a monopsony is one buyer. So I think that we're trying to force a monopsony, and China does not like it. That was actually quite provocative, and who can blame them? Uh, so that started around the Pelosi thing. So I think that is part of this situation, a part of the tension here. So China's been running around Taiwan and making that kind of noise because they say this guy is openly separatist, which is illegal, according to them. So our guys going over there, the congressman came over, I believe, in and around the inauguration itself. The senators are over there, I believe, now. And their presence there and the things that are saying is quite provocative. They are talking openly about continuing to arm Taiwan. I mean, I can't believe we have no formal relationship and we still arm them, and arms that Putin says are better than the arms we're giving Ukraine, not the old Russian stuff. We're giving them fancy new shiny stuff. And it seems like we are provoking escalation with China. It looked to me, I understand the chips thing is about kind of total dominance. We want those good chips. This seems like selling arms to Taiwan, or giving them to Taiwan at the US taxpayers' expense. But I think it's selling arms to Taiwan and escalating conflict with China, which China says they want peaceful reunification. As long as they think that that is a realistic possibility, they're going to work towards that. But if they think that that's not possible anymore, such as through a declaration of independence, they are going to, it seems to me, I think it's common wisdom, they're going to invade. And they would win, of course, in a flash, just like Russia would have won with Ukraine in a flash, without Western, specifically U.S. help. So whatever our plan is, either this is all just a way to sell arms without actually provoking a war, but a war is a good way to sell arms. I don't know if we're trying to get Taiwan leveled. We can't be, because we want their factories. We will use the chips as a national defense excuse to go in there and defend Taiwan against China after provoking this, which could just be a way to start war. I mean, these guys are crazy right now. And we're going to talk about the craziness in Ukraine too, speaking of World War III. But I have to say, as far as Taiwan is concerned, my father was so pissed at Jimmy Carter for withdrawing. We were supposed to protect Taiwan for, I think, 99 years, something like that. And Carter withdrew our protection. My father was such a non-interventionist, but he was very anti-communist China, and he used to work hard for it, including a lifelong boycott, my mother too, of Chinese goods. And he used to do my longtime listeners will know this, what he called card parties, where he and his friends would make up cards that said, these products, these shoes particularly, were made in China. Please don't buy them. And they'd go to the shoe stores on Friday night and put them all in the boxes. And they'd have to do it secretly because, of course, the guys who were selling the shoes didn't want that. So my parents were staunch anti-Chinese, very pro-Taiwan, Formosa, I believe it was called back in the day. Not my parents didn't call it that, but I mean, I was versed in it. So I'm all for everybody having self-governance. I would like individual self-governance, but in any case, the smallest possible unit of self-governance, I am for. And as far as Taiwan is concerned, if they want to have self-governance, that's awesome. I actually do not think that's the choice that they're facing. And I think it was Tammy Duckworth says, well, you don't, democracy is messy. I'm going to tell you about that in a second. Democracy is messy, but it's better than authoritarian rule, which you'll get from China. But the choices these countries are facing now is not a choice between independence and Chinese domination or independence and Russian domination. It's a choice between Russian domination and US domination or Chinese domination and US domination. So at that point, thinking the horrible things that we do, that we know that we do, I mean, that our government does with our money at the point of a gun to us and to them, I cannot defend either position. So if there's some little spark of democracy happening there, even if it's stuff that we don't like, I think you have to weigh if it's an act of sovereignty and if it's an act of, I'm not even a fan of democracy. I don't like democracy. I like objective human rights that are defended by clear foundational documents with minimal law or natural law. That's basically my position. So I'm not defending democracy. But these people are going over there claiming that they are going over there in defense of democracy, which I have hereby trademarked, democracy trademark, because this has nothing to do with the definition of democracy. It's just US, like, we want you to do what we want you to do. So the issue right now, which our lawmakers, one of them, I have it here somewhere, said, is, democracy is messy. Sorry, this is what it's like. Because the dispute over this new legislation is they're coming to fisticuffs in Parliament. They're hitting each other. There is serious, political violence is the theme of the day, but it is really happening there. It certainly looks like it's really happening there. And here is the legislation. It says, the opposition, which is the opposition to the president, William Lai, which, by the way, I always scratch the surface on these guys. I'm like, obviously, he's our puppet. Like, when did he get co-opted? So I always look, I'm like, when was his dad in the, foreign service? Or like, when did he go to Harvard? And lo, he went to Harvard. So he got a master's in public health. So you'd think it would be fine. But he started when he was pretty young as like the physician's political representative in favor of the DPP, which like I said, like, I'm not for Taiwan being subjugated to China. So I don't blame him for his choice of party, but he's been in government since 1994. I don't know when he got out of Harvard. He was born in 1959. So he was 35, I guess, when he was had been in the medical profession, and then he went into politics. So I don't know, but obviously there's some connection there. If somebody wants to connect with him, and he's clearly on doing what we want. So the legislation is the opposition, so the KMT and the TPP, want to give Parliament greater scrutiny powers over the government, including a controversial proposal to criminalize officials who are deemed to make false statements in Parliament. The changes expand the legislature's investigative powers, require the president to report regularly to lawmakers and answer questions from them, and criminalize contempt of Parliament by government officials. So this reminds me of what's going on in Georgia. By coincidence, I had unearthed that story, which I don't hear anybody talking about here, where Parliament passed some law that was about getting rid of foreign influence in their media, or at least, like, if you have more than 20% foreign funding, you have to reveal it. The president vetoed it, very Western leaning president, and Parliament overrode the veto. So that happened since the last time we talked. But it made it clear to me there, and this is also clear, that it's much easier for us to control a single individual, like a president, than an entire parliament. So we, of course, want the president to have more power than the parliament, which I would say, again, would be anti-democratic. But as far as democracy trademark, it seems par for the course. So the KMT says that the changes are necessary to improve government accountability. It denies being pro-Beijing. It's called the China law, just like the Georgia stuff was called the Russia law, and says claims that it is acting at the behest of China are groundless and politically motivated. Whatever, I'm sure it is. I'm sure the two factions are U.S. versus China. I don't doubt it. But our politicians are full of shit, of course. Like, this is not breaking news, but this is how you see it in action, especially with Taiwan, because there's such big money involved with the big tech and the defense and everything. The DPP, on the other hand, says that, quote, normal consideration has not been given. So I guess they're saying it didn't go through the proper process, but I did not see anywhere where they reported specifics. And so they say, therefore, it is unconstitutional and they will not respect the law, not acknowledge the law. I don't know if it has veto power or what. But yeah, so they have all this violence in Parliament, and it looked real to me. However, there's a big move towards a lot of violence. So it was just made the rounds, something that happened in December in Ukraine, where somebody threw a grenade into a political meeting, counselors meeting, and he himself got hurt. Many people got hurt, and I don't know what it was all about, but it's just there's so many examples of political violence coming at the Slovakian attempted assassination. So definitely stay tuned for today's clip, because I'm going to get into some of that stuff. I also want to say, as far as the law, this legislation about holding politicians accountable for lies they tell in Parliament, contempt of Parliament, we have the protections against. I believe you cannot be brought. I remember when Harry Reid said something slanderous about Mitt Romney on the Senate floor, but there was no recourse whatsoever, because you can say whatever you want on the Senate floor and you cannot be held for slander. So it seems fishy, but I totally understand it, because it actually probably protects the minority position, which is what I think is the greatest feature of the American system. Of course, it's waning, but how much power the minority has, like filibusters and supermajority votes and this kind of thing. Because if I were standing in Congress and I said what I know to be true, what we talk about, what you all know to be true also, my guess is they would say I was lying and throw me in jail, So I would not be able to say things that I knew to be true because of the inversions right now. So I understand the objection to the law, but the fact that the law itself, which seems to be going through somewhat democratic process, certainly no less so than the opposition, to say that they don't like the law because it's anti-democratic, that does not, I can't support that. And of course, all the articles I'm reading, I notice if they just pick some random guy who's a teacher there and ask him all sorts of questions, and he unpacks it all for you. He tells you what's going on in Taiwan. And one particular article that I read, was it NBC, BBC? I don't know. It must have been the NBC articles I was reading. The same guys, like, basically feeding the reporter all the information, and it's just a memo. Like, it's not like the reporter's there talking to the guy. He says, if Donald Trump is reelected, all predictability and certainty goes out the window, and everything we have to say about cross-strait relations will drastically change, which actually is different from basically everything else I've read. What the lawmakers say is, like, the issues with this policy with Taiwan is not going to change. And I had actually noticed, I thought, didn't Trump, wasn't he the one who made the first phone call to Taiwan in basically decades to congratulate this guy's predecessor on the presidency? So yeah, there's no way this isn't part of the whole continuum of the them. But the guy who's feeding us the narrative, Lev Nachman, a political scientist and assistant professor at National Chengchi University in Taipei, sounds like a guy who would know stuff. He's part of the Atlantic Council. He went to Harvard. He's a Fulbright scholar. Anyway, so if you don't think this stuff if you think any of this is organic, I'm here to tell you it is not. Okay. So I just wanted to tell you just two quotes, one from China and one from this guy, Lai. China urged the American lawmakers to stop playing the Taiwan card, stop interfering in China's internal affairs, stop supporting and condoning Taiwan independence separatist forces, and stop undermining Sino-US relations and peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Mao Ning, a ministry spokesperson, said at a news conference on Monday. So I actually think that this is that our lawmakers went over there to provoke China and then have the Chinese reaction give good optics to this big push towards getting Taiwan more military aid, more weaponry. And the chip stuff is important, and that's probably the most important thing. And I think this guy is kind of referring to how, I should say, it was considered quite provocative to go and try to be a chips monopsony with regard to Taiwan. Anyway, Lai, the president, says, with your support, I hope that the U.S. Congress, through legislative action, will continue to assist Taiwan in strengthening its self-defense capabilities, thereby advancing bilateral exchanges and cooperation. So I think Lai is telling the U.S., give us military stuff, and we'll make sure you're numero uno on the chips. This is quite provocative, but if they want a war, if it is the will of the American people to get into a war with China to defend Taiwan's independence, I personally think that's totally unconstitutional. But at the very least, admit it, you know. Okay. So that's the World War III happening in the Far East. Let's go to Russia and Ukraine. Have you heard what's been bubbling up the last couple of days? France and Germany, following in the footsteps of the NATO Secretary General, have said that Ukraine has the green light to send missiles into Russia, as long as they limit exactly where they strike to places where Russia has launched missiles at them. So we don't want to start World War III. We don't want to escalate. That's almost a direct quote. We support Ukraine and we don't want escalation. French President Emmanuel Macron said at a joint news conference with Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who, like, you could see the sweat on his brow. I mean, I didn't look at that, but when I read, this guy has gone kicking and screaming, but he's such a puss that he is going to let this thing escalate. Merkel would not have done that. She wanted the gas. She wanted the pipelines and stuff. I don't know how she stood on her own 2 feet, but she did. But this guy just capitulates at every turn. It would be better if he were like a warmonger, if he did believe in it, but he's just capitulating. And so they're like, and then he says, this Olaf Scholz says, I find it strange when some people argue that it should not be allowed to defend itself, Ukraine, and take measures that are suitable for this. I would like to explain to this guy what he finds it strange. Some people argue against this, but I would like to say two things. One, if you think Taiwan has a right to self-determination, so does the Donbass, so does Crimea, that have basically unanimous referenda saying they want out. As soon as Ukraine barred the Russian language from political discourse, these people were disenfranchised. Russian is their first language. Of course they wanted out. They were the target. So they wanted out. And Russia is limiting its response, or was provoked entirely after 8 years of seeing this go nowhere but down, is responding to that. So Ukraine is not defending itself. It's asserting dominance over land that does not want to be associated with anymore. And shooting those missiles off into Russia is quite likely to start World War III. And it's because Ukraine cannot do it on its own. Putin explained that long range precision strikes require space reconnaissance assets. I mean, I think you just know intuitively that Ukraine can't just pop off with that kind of precision in any case. And that's what we're going to say. Oh, well, in order to adhere to our requirement that they use precision, we're going to have to do it for them. But it's not us because it's them. Just All right. Kiev does not have this precision stuff, but the US does. And this targeting is already done by highly qualified specialists from the West without Ukrainian participation. So Putin's saying this is already is I think he's saying the guidance is already done. I don't think he's saying that we're striking. He does say that there's a lot of stuff on the borders. But anyway, oh, here's another thing I didn't notice. Did you guys see that Zelensky's term is up? Zelensky is no longer president of Ukraine. He says he is, and we say he is, but he's not. His term is up. And he said, well, we can't hold elections because war. But in the Constitution, it actually makes a provision for parliamentary elections to be suspended during wartime or during emergency, in which case Parliament could extend its own term, but the president cannot, and he did. I mean, wow. So Putin says Parliament is the only legitimate authority in Ukraine now. I mean, the plot thickens. Oh, and he says why. Get this is so I've noticed this here. We always set up a scapegoat like Trump. He's not really a Republican. So when he does crazy stuff, we don't have to take responsibility for it. Listen to this. Putin suggested that the reason why Ukraine's quote overseas masters were keeping Zelensky in power was so that Zelensky and his government would bear full blame for all the unpopular decisions that have been made and have yet to be made, such as the lowering of the military draft eligibility age to 18. Sometime later, the current representatives of the executive branch will simply be tossed out and replaced by a new government that would not bear the responsibility for such decisions. If this is the idea, then the logic is clear. That's Quigley's old trick. Throw the bums out and then put more bums in. But the BBC, and this is the BBC, but it's just all the Western press, have these crazy they actually support that this Zelensky just not having elections is democratic. I hate to read quotes, but it's just the propaganda is so thick. You won't believe it unless you hear it. It says, while his approval ratings have inevitably waned, Zelensky has been able to use his enduring appeal and desire for stability to extend his term in office. It says in peacetime, it would have expired his term and an election would have been called. But the martial law brought in with Russia's full-scale invasion, not a full-scale invasion, means that can't happen. And there's broad public support for that too. Really? How do you know? How do you know? Your polls? You calling people up? Okay. We see these narratives from Russia and how it tries to impose on Western minds the thought that Ukraine is not a democracy. Just because they don't have elections doesn't mean it's not a democracy. Whew, whew. Okay, that's why it has democracy trademark. It's something entirely different. They own it. It is a working definition. Anyway, stupid. All right, well, we are right there for comments. We've got more stories to get to in a very telling little clip. So, all right, let's hit some. I gotta do something with my computer. Okay. Hey, y'all. Stella, yay! Interesting. Stella tells us that yesterday, China partially lifted bans on Australian trade, meat, wine, etc. They need our shit. Yes. Oh, hello. This is Lanny from Preserving Today, from The World as It Is Today. Hi, friends. I'm here because I was triggered by the anti home birth propaganda headline because you did have a home birth during lockdown, as I recall. I'm going to get to that story next, Lanny. So, Stella says they are coming for the home births, even the in vitro. Yes. Oh, Lanny, she's got her homeborn baby has to go out and play. He is so cute. I've met him in person, and I would like to go meet him again today this summer. Wow. Renee says that the lady at the health food store, who is a known reliable source, but I totally believe it, said we hit Russia twice hard in the last couple of days. Okay, then maybe we have. I mean, Putin's also saying that, so I knew Stella would like my new trademark term, democracy. So let us, I want to uh, talk about the home birth thing. It, it, I actually was going to talk to Lanny about that. There was an article that I study that came out of Scotland, and it was based on over 500,000 women in the UK and their birth experiences, whether or not they used an epidural and what the outcomes were. Apparently, so epidural is they inject something, I believe, in your spine. If I don't, certainly in your back. I've had them. I have had two, and I did not have one. So I had three babies. One was a very emergency situation. I can hardly remember it. Super traumatic. It was not a C-section though. To the credit of that doctor. And then I had a natural birth, which I did not want at all. I'm not only not home birth, I don't even want natural birth. I want the epidural. But I had a doctor who did not want to come in at 11 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning, whatever it was. So bad doctor. That was a different doctor. And I did not get the epidural that I wanted. And I remember making a note to myself, like, do not forget how much this hurt because I'm not doing it again. So I did get an epidural the next time. But it's the norm. It's the norm in this country, I think, to get epidural. So 75% of the people get it. You can opt for natural birth. And of course, you're at home birth, you're not going to have an epidural. So epidural kills the pain. It kills the pain in your lower body so that you can stay conscious. You can push, you can be aware of the birthing situation, but it doesn't hurt. But there are, as far as I was concerned, what my understanding was that there were risks involved. And I think there are risks involved. Uh, this study said that in the UK, only 20% or 22% of the people opt for an epidural, even though it says, even though the UK, despite healthcare being free at the point of access. I guess that means you can get epidural at will if you want to without qualifying for some particular reason. I don't know about that. It's likely, in my opinion, that the doctors are not told to encourage them, and that is why you only have 20% acceptance rate, and that this study very clearly says they believe that women should be encouraged to get an epidural because it can. The headline is epidural during labor reduces severe complications by 35%. And I absolutely had to scratch my head about that. There were so many variables in the population. There's age, like so many things that can contribute, and they're talking about severe complications like death and extreme bleeding up to 6 weeks after the fact. Uh, and they're and what they say, but they don't break it out by demographic. And they say that the higher the risk you are, the more likely you are to benefit from an epidural because it relaxes you. Or I don't think they actually know the real reason that it's supposed to relax you. And it seems like the benefits accrue mostly to the people that we have some breaking news. So stick with me. I'm going to finish the story and then we're going to get to that. Thank you, Mark. Okay. So the benefit seems to accrue mostly to the people who have high risk pregnancies. What I wanted them to do is break this down by age, by weight, by socioeconomic status, by race. They pointed out that race was a major factor, by the risk factors for the pregnancy versus the risk factors for the epidural. I mean, it's 500,000 people in this study, and it's in a medical setting. They should have all these stats, and I think they do, because they said in the article in the study that they adjusted for these kind of things, but they won't show you the adjustments they made, which I think is what they do now, so that you can't break out a race. So you can't say, well, this affects exclusively Indian women, so I'm not going to worry about it. They don't want you to do that. So they don't, especially in psych studies, and you see it with crime stats too. They don't want you to distance yourself from the problem if you're not in the demographic it affects. So they clump it all together and they don't let you see how they take it out. But it said nothing about home births. But my feeling was that low risk people, low risk women who are aware of the situation, who are the most likely to opt for home births, are probably, maybe, I have no idea because they won't break it out, but they may not benefit from the epidural. Yet telling women that you have a 35% lower chance of bad things happening if you get an epidural is going to discourage home births. So I want that information broken out so you can make the decision yourself as if this would benefit you or not. Seems to me there has to be a profit motive behind this to encourage people to buy epidurals, but I wouldn't be surprised if the underlying theme is anti-home birth. And if you don't see, especially out of the UK, since this is where it's starting, they may lead the charge in really discouraging home births. On the other hand, to the extent they care about the budget, maybe they don't. Maybe they won't discourage it. But I just feel like this is one stepping stone in that direction. So if you see the study, I would dig in a little more closely. But holy cow. Mark Davis, thank you so much for bringing this information. Sorry to comment on something way off topic, and I was going to wait to talk about this till the verdict was in, but it's coming in right now. Trump guilty on all counts. And do I have any thoughts on Justice Alito's flag gate? Is it a dog whistle to American Christian patriots, a psyop, a sign of marital problems? I want to know more about Trump. Guilty on all counts. What are the implications? Okay, I guess we don't know what the punishment is yet because they just came out on all counts. This makes me nuts because, and then I'll talk about the Alito thing. This makes me nuts because we laughed, 34, very close to 33 counts, stemming from a single thing, from a single action, supposedly this hush money thing, and that was intended to, that he didn't even do it, right? Isn't that the story? He didn't really do it, but the idea was he was intended that it should be done, and that his intent behind that intent is that it should influence the election. Can you imagine if everyone who suppressed a scandal to win an election were put in jail? The world would be a better place. But it's preposterous. And I actually tweeted out to both Anthony Raimondo and Robert Barnes that it makes me crazy when people are charged with with many under many different statutes or in multiple jurisdictions, state and federal, for one single act. One actus reus, one mens rea, and you've got 34 charges. It's absolutely unconstitutional in my opinion, and I think Anthony Raimondo gave me some snaps for that, but, he said, right now, this obviously is the law that we operate under, but, he thinks it's outrageous as well. I mean, this is really the question. So will Trump my everybody seems to like I've noticed people are like he's going to get reelected. My thinking had been just from a psyop point of view that he would be the shoe-in, but for this stuff. So then you have that legitimacy crisis. You have to have every single presidential election since 2000 has had a legitimacy crisis. What is it going to be this year? And I still think there's a possibility that Trump is that this or some other shenanigans is the vehicle by which Trump gets uh, robbed of the presidency again. Maybe they're pushing for civil war. I don't know. But anyway, the Samuel Alito thing, probably a psyop. All I know about this is that the wife said she was put up that pine flag or whatever to in your face her neighbors. That's to me, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't cause trouble with my neighbors out of respect for my husband who doesn't want trouble. I do a lot of things out of respect for my husband and his job that I just yeah, I could be a funny shock jock mouthing off at people and, get rage bait or whatever, but the people in my family have to live in the world and it's not a joke. I mean, you have to have a certain decorum, you have to get along with people you live next door to. So I don't believe that going to she just did that and he has nothing to do with it, which is what he says. Yeah, I mean, it could be I haven't thought too hard about why why what the underlying psyop of it is going to be. I think I lost the original comment here. So the original comment was, "Is it a dog whistle to American Christian patriots, a psyop, a sign of marital problems?" Definitely a psyop, in my opinion. Is it a dog whistle? The Christian nationalists are definitely the going to be in the spotlight this year, and I am truly worried about that FBI memo that said that they were going to use a traditional Catholic Latin mass type place to have I guess false flags. I don't know, but yeah, it's super scary. So yeah, yes, Trump would appeal and ask that sentencing be delayed till after the appeal process. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I'm not going to guess, but I guess Jack kind of says it says it best. The political landscape today is literally various intelligence agencies competing for best picture. It's really true. Oh my gosh, is that Bubbles? I don't know who your picture is, but it's very cute. Uh Stella from Australia says, "What? A criminal running the USA? No." Anyway, okay, so that is actually quite timely because the clip I picked is so crazy. I was listening, as you observed from our story out of Taiwan, Ukraine, Slovakia. And I mentioned the other day that after the trial on Tuesday, Robert De Niro was out there having Trump derangement syndrome, which gives us derangement syndrome, TDS, DS. But he was just having straight up TDS simple, TDS simplex. So, so he was out there screaming and yelling. And then there was a cop that came, and I just didn't know who this cop was. I didn't even know that he was a Capitol cop from January 6th. I just heard him say this Trump wants political violence, something like that. And I thought, oh, it's playing right into all these themes that are emerging. Don't forget what January 6th was all about. Same thing. I think the Slovakian thing is all about getting in political repression. Political violence is going to be there to spur political repression. And maybe it's just to digitize the whole space. I don't know what, but it's definitely there for the First Amendment. So, so I talked about with Bobby, my producer, what like clip we should do. And we talked about the De Niro clip and this. And I said, well, what about the cop? So I sent him the cop and I'm like, this guy looks fishy. You know, what's up with this guy? I think he's lying so hard. He's almost shaking. He's lying so hard. It's so much harder to like do public speaking when you're lying than when you're not lying, which is also hard. But I just like, I don't know how I found it, but I found a tweet from, I'm going to say who did it. God bless you for not being taken down. Let's go, Brandon, which is hilarious. I love that expression so much. At IM_bonafide, BONAFIDE. He tweeted a picture in August 2021, actually, and I'm going to show you. So I guess it would be out of line to call somebody a liar. But so I'm probably going to have to take that back. I take it back. I find this guy's story hard to reconcile with the pictures that this guy tweeted. So you're going to have to make of it what you will. Let's bring the conversation into the chat. So if you're listening, I will see you off now. Wish you adieu. This is Monica Perez. And if you're here chatting, we can chat in while we listen to this clip. Oh, wait. Where's the clip, bro? This is going to take a minute because I was supposed to upload it and I didn't. So literally you're going to have to sit there for a minute. It will be edited out for it's because I asked him to put that picture in. This is a problem. Hold on. I know. He just texted me. I emailed you the clip. I know you emailed me the clip. Oh, you emailed me to where I can pull it up. Okay, sorry guys. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. I think this is where we go to the answer. That last doot. If I were any good at music, I would probably have been able to whip that whole thing out for 30 seconds, which is what I need. Here we go. I think we've got it. I think this is going to happen. Hold on. This is not bad, like as far as being a tech spaz. All right, let's see if this works.
I came here today to remind Americans of what Donald Trump is capable of and the violence that he unleashed on all Americans on January 6, 2021. For 2 decades, I was a D.C. police officer serving the citizens of the District of Columbia, primarily working in narcotics. On January 6, 2021, I heard distress calls coming from fellow police officers on the Capitol. as thousands of Trump supporters rushed them and brutally assaulted members of law enforcement. That day, I, like many other, hundreds of other DC police officers, put on a uniform and responded to the Capitol to assist our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, defending the Capitol from a violent, armed mob of Trump's supporters. These supporters were fueled by Trump's lies and the lies of his surrogates, lies that the 2020 election was stolen. Those same lies have been spewed by Donald Trump and his surrogates about what happened to me and so many other police officers on January 6, 2021. That day, I was brutally assaulted. I was pulled from the police line by a man named Albuquerque Head, a Trump supporter who later pled guilty to his violent assault on me. While being restrained by the violent mob, I was beaten. An individual named Kyle Young tried to strip me of my firearm, while chants of kill him with his own gun were echoed by other members of the crowd. At that time, Thomas Civic, a man from Buffalo, New York, stripped me of my badge and my police radio, my lifeline to call for help from other officers. All the while, I continued to be beaten and then struck with a taser on my neck by Daniel Rodriguez, another Trump supporter who also pled guilty to his violent assault on me. All four of these individuals are self-admitted Trump supporters. All four of them committed violent assault on law enforcement. I'm just one representative of the hundreds of police officers that were assaulted that day by Donald Trump supporters, inspired by his lies. The lies that continue to this day to inspire my fellow Americans to turn against their fellow Americans, to turn against police officers.